Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the Cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Bitcoin, dubious speculation. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, go to a thumbs up, and also check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Let's go ahead and jump in. So, Bitcoin has had a sizable correction this week. I mean, it did go all the way up to 108. Now it's more than $10,000 below that, slightly lower than the low from last week, but it is still generally trending at much higher valuations than it was just a few weeks ago. But I do want to talk about this move, talk about, what does it look the most similar to? One of the things you'll note is that last year, right, if you look at the daily time frame, last year in 2023, Bitcoin kind of went through something similar where it kind of like slowly rallied up, and then it got a larger move, and then it got these larger corrections, and then it consolidated for a long time before then moving up once again. You could argue that something like that is happening again, right? You get this move up, and then it accelerates higher, and then you get one of these larger sell-offs. And what's really interesting about this move is if you look at USDT dominance, it's almost a carbon copy of like the type of move that is happening, right? So if you look at USDT dominance and compare it to 2023, what you'll see is that USDT dominance actually was dropping, and it started to break down, but then it wasn't actually able to for a while, right? You see this, how USDT dominance held support here. It tried holding support again for a little bit. USDT dominance went up to the 21-week EMA, got rejected, and then it broke down in February, meaning Bitcoin broke up while USDT dominance went down. You're kind of seeing similar thing, right? Where like you have this low by USDT dominance, it then sweeps that low, and one of the reasons why altcoins aren't keeping up with Bitcoin, generally speaking, and if Bitcoin goes up, they go up less. If Bitcoin drops, alts go down more, is arguably because USDT dominance is still relatively low, right? And it's not yet clear that it's going to break down again. It certainly could, but as I've said before, I think horizontal support levels are going to become a lot more important as USDT dominance continues to mature. And so the way that you really get a big move in the altcoin market is to see essentially, a lot more retail money flood into the space. I think one of the issues right now for, for altcoins is that Bitcoin goes up, but USDT dominance, even though Bitcoin was going up for a while, USDT dominance was not going that much further down. One way to visualize that actually is if you go look at the advanced decline index for the top 100 cryptocurrencies, you can see that the ADI has been dropping since like 2021, meaning a lot of cryptocurrencies are actually trending down, not up, which is different than what you saw back over here. But back over here, QE had already returned. We haven't seen the return of QE yet, and that could be the reasons why a lot of alts are struggling. But then you have a few cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and a few others that are basically lifting everything else up, or at least they're lifting the total market cap up, even if the market cap of many individual alts hasn't really changed a whole lot over the last few years. So I think the reason for that is just we've never really seen that return of quantitative easing. Therefore, the ADI continues to go down, even while Bitcoin and total market cap in general has tended to continue to go to the upside. So I thought that was an interesting way to sort of think about the market. Now, in the short term, Bitcoin is still well above its bull market support band. But I would say, sometimes it gets a little too far extended. And we did talk about this a few times on the live streams. And it's funny because like every time we talk about it, so many people are like, oh, it's not going to matter this time. And then it ends up mattering once again, how this is the natural log of the price divided by the 20-week moving average. And you can see that every time it hits this trend line, it can find corrections from there, right? And we're potentially getting one again. You see, we got one over here in March. We're getting a little bit of a correction here again. Again, it's going to eventually break through because otherwise, if it doesn't, whenever this goes below zero, the natural log of the price divided by the 20-week moving average, if it's below zero on this chart, it would imply that the price is always below the 20-week moving average, and I don't expect that to eventually be the case. So therefore, this trend line eventually has to break. The only question is when, not if, in my view. But again, it was extended a little bit. If you look at the short-term bubble risk, which is also just the extension from the 20-week moving average, and we talked about this a little bit as well in the live streams, you can kind of see it's in that range where you can find some of these corrections where Bitcoin comes back down to earth. Now, there is a chance, right? There's a chance that you see Bitcoin fall all the way back to the bull market support band. But remember, last time it kind of just consolidated and waited for the 20-week SMA to catch up. So that's also an outcome. But I do want to at least put one potential outcome on your radar, just in case it happens, and that's basically back testing this trend line again. We've seen that pattern happen a lot with all Bitcoin pairs and other random valuations where like you'll see sort of a breakout and then a back test and then it continues. There is always a chance that something like that happens. It doesn't have to be, and I'm not asking you to like sell in anticipation of that, but there is a chance that you see something like that happen. That's actually what happened last cycle, right? I mean, you basically had sort of a lower high structure. You eventually had a breakout followed by a major drop down. Now, this was a pandemic-induced recession, so it actually fell below the trend line, but you could argue that had there not been a pandemic-induced recession, maybe you wouldn't have had the back test at all, or maybe it just would have held it as support. You've seen this similar as well. I mean, you can see back over here, if you switch this over to a if we come in here and sort of zoom into these lower highs right here, you can kind of see something similar happening. I mean, it's not an exact carbon copy, but back over here, there were a couple of lower highs that Bitcoin had, right? A couple of lower highs, it then broke out, was up here for a while, back tested it, and then moved up. So that can happen. And I'm not asking you to take it to the bank. I'm just saying, look, there's a chance that you see something like that happen where Bitcoin, maybe it even spends some more time up here. And maybe it even sets a new all-time high, right? But it could always backtest this trend line eventually. If it does, I would expect it to get a big bounce off of it, right? I would assume that it probably wouldn't play out like this, where it just falls all the way below it, because I don't really think you're going to see the unemployment rate go from 4% to 10% basically overnight, which is what happened back then. If you overlay the unemployment rate with the price of Bitcoin, this crash corresponded to the time when the unemployment rate went from 3.5% to to like almost 15% or so, essentially overnight. So as long as you don't have something like that, then I think you have to sort of approach it in a more realistic and rational way, rather than just calling for those types of moves. You just sort of say, all right, well, from a technical analysis perspective, it could do something, like that. But anyways, right now Bitcoin is just around 97K. If you go look at, I wanted to check back in here very quickly with the stablecoin supply ratio oscillator, because that's actually a really interesting indicator, because you can see that a lot of times it'll top and then the market will trend up as the SSRO trends back down. And then occasionally you'll see the SSRO get another big bounce. And that's what led to the next leg higher back over here in 2024. Also, something similar happened in March of 2023. So the levels that the SSRO got those major bounces were at 0.19, and then over here at 0.5 or so, right? So you can see like where those were, right? Right now, this metric is at 1.3, right? It's at 1.3, but I would certainly keep an eye on it, because it is dropping relatively quickly, and it wouldn't take very long for it to get back down to kind of where it was last year. And you can see that this structure, right, the structure that Bitcoin has right here looks really similar to the structure that it had over here, where it gets a big move up in October, November, then slowly trends up, and then kind of consolidates and falls off for a little while. So certainly an interesting thing to track, to follow. I think the SSRO probably deserves a little bit more of our attention than we ultimately give it. Again, the extension from the fair value is relatively low, still only about 4%. Do note there's 3 cycles here you can look at. One of the cycles, once we went overvalued, that was it. 2 other cycles we went overvalued. We did get a couple of pullbacks, one right there, and then one earlier on. And then over here, you can see we had a couple of pullbacks after going into the overvaluation territory. And if you go look at the extension from the fair value like this, you can see what I'm talking about, right? 1 overvaluation, 2 overvaluations, and then really go. 2016 cycle, it was just gone when it went above it. Last cycle, overvaluation back down, and then go. Same thing again. Maybe you got an overvaluation here, back down, and then a slight overvaluation again. If it does come back down, below the fair value, that actually could be a pretty good opportunity. If you wanted to get a position. So certainly interesting to follow. Look at monthly returns on Bitcoin. Still technically green. You can't necessarily say that about other cryptocurrencies, right? If you look at Ethereum, it's actually red right now. If you look at total market cap, it's actually red. So Bitcoin's actually doing better than a lot of the cryptocurrency market. Now, if we go look at year-to-date ROI of Bitcoin, we've been tracking it compared to two things. One was the last year, and then one was the halving year return. So it's actually still following what it did last year the closest. It almost looks like a carbon copy of it, just a slightly diminished version. You could also look at the average of prior halving years, right? You can look at the average of prior halving years and see that it is falling off a little bit. So it doesn't necessarily have to follow that all the way through. But anyways, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. I just wanted to give you guys, sort of a brief outlook on how things might shape up here for the next few weeks and just sort of show those options. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll see what happens. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, and again, check out the sale on Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.